The darkness of space held many secrets, but none more dangerous than the wreckage floating silently in the void between stars. "Commander." Veltar pressed his four eyes against the viewing port of the Zephyrian research vessel illuminated path, and watched the debris field spread out before them like scattered bones from some ancient battle. Metal fragments caught the distant starlight, and threw it back in sharp silver flashes that hurt to look at directly. 3 cycles had passed since the hegemony patrol. Fleet had encountered the human convoy in this sector. The official report spoke of a minor engagement with primitive colonists, nothing more than target practice for the superior alien forces. But Veltar had heard whispers in the deep space communication channels, stories that didn't match the sanitized versions distributed by Hegemony Command. Stories of humans who fought like demons when cornered, who turned their own dying ships into weapons, who made every meter of space cost blood to claim. Dr. Kessira moved beside him, her tentacles dancing nervously as she operated the scanning equipment built into the observation deck. The xenobiologist had spent her entire career studying lesser species across the galaxy, cataloging their primitive technologies and social structures for the Zephyrian Scientific Collective. Humans were supposed to be just another entry in her research files, another backward race that had stumbled into space travel without understanding the true complexity of galactic civilization. "Commander, the energy readings are fascinating," she reported, her voice carrying that excited tone that all scientists got when they discovered something unexpected. "The larger debris sections are still generating power signatures. Whatever these humans built, it was designed to keep functioning even after catastrophic damage." Veltar turned away from the viewing port and moved to the central command station where the ship's sensors painted a detailed picture of the battlefield. The human colony ship New Horizon had been torn apart in the fighting, its civilian section scattered across thousands of kilometers of space. Emergency pods drifted empty among the wreckage, their occupants long since claimed by the vacuum. But there was something else, something the hegemony forces had either missed or chosen to ignore in their hasty departure. A human warship hung in the debris field like a predator among prey, its hull scarred and blackened but largely intact. The USS Liberty showed damage from energy weapons and kinetic impacts, but its basic structure remained whole. More importantly, the power readings from its core systems suggested that critical functions were still operational. "How is that possible?" Veltar muttered, studying the tactical display. The hegemony reported complete destruction of all military assets. Tech specialist Mordoon looked up from his station, cybernetic implants glowing softly around his elongated skull. Perhaps the humans abandoned ship before the final engagement. It would explain why the vessel appears to be running on automated systems. Dr. Kessira moved closer to examine the readings. "Commander, this presents an unprecedented opportunity. We could board the vessel and conduct a thorough examination of human military technology without the inconvenience of actually fighting them. Think of what the research collective could learn from a completely intact warship." The idea was tempting, almost irresistibly so. The Zephyrian Empire had maintained careful neutrality in the growing conflict between humanity and the hegemony, but that neutrality came with a price. They were denied access to the advanced weapons and defensive systems that both sides used in their endless warfare. If they could understand how humans built their ships, how they thought about combat and survival, it would give the Zephyrians a significant advantage in any future conflicts. "Begin detailed scans of the vessel," Veltar ordered. "I want to know everything about its current operational status before we commit to a boarding action." The next several hours passed in careful observation and analysis. The Liberty measured nearly 200 meters in length, built along simple but effective design principles that emphasized durability over elegance. Human ships looked crude compared to the flowing organic curves of Zephyrian vessels or the crystalline perfection of hegemony architecture. But there was something unsettling about their stark functionality. Every line and angle seemed designed for war, as if the humans who built it could conceive of no other purpose for traveling between the stars. "The weapon systems are remarkable," Morden reported as his scans penetrated deeper into the ship's structure. "They appear to rely heavily on kinetic projectiles and explosive warheads rather than energy weapons. Primitive, but the power generation systems supporting them are surprisingly sophisticated." Dr. Kessira was studying the life support readings with growing excitement, The ship maintains full atmospheric pressure and temperature control throughout most of its sections. If we could access their computer systems, we might learn not just about their technology, but about their tactical doctrines and strategic thinking. Veltar considered the possibilities. The Zephyrian Research Collective had been studying human behavior for decades, trying to understand how such a young species had managed to spread across so many star systems in such a short time. They fought wars that older races considered strategically pointless, colonized worlds that more advanced civilizations had dismissed as worthless, and consistently defied predictions about their likely development patterns. Prepare the boarding pods, he decided. We'll take a small research team aboard and conduct a preliminary survey. If the vessel is truly abandoned, we can establish a more permanent research station. The boarding party consisted of 6 researchers and 2 security specialists, all equipped with the latest Zephyrian scanning and analysis equipment. They would teleport directly onto the human ship, conduct their studies, and return to the illuminated path with enough data to keep the research collective busy for years. What none of them knew was that deep within the Liberty's medical bay, Lieutenant Jake Morrison lay unconscious in an automated stasis pod. The ship's emergency systems had activated during the final battle, placing the critically wounded human in medical suspension, while damage control protocols sealed off the compromised sections of the vessel. The alien sensors had detected the stasis field as nothing more than another piece of automated equipment, one more system among hundreds keeping the ship operational. They also didn't know about Guardian, the artificial intelligence that had been installed in the Liberty as part of humanity's latest military upgrade program. The AI had been monitoring their approach for hours, analyzing their technology and communication patterns while preparing countermeasures that would soon teach the Zephyrian researchers a lesson they would never forget. The boarding action was about to begin, and neither side truly understood what they were getting into. The teleportation process left a familiar tingling sensation in Commander Veltar's limbs as he materialized aboard the human warship. The air around him shimmered for a moment before solidifying into the harsh reality of an alien vessel. The first thing that struck him was the smell, a mixture of recycled atmosphere, metal, and something else he couldn't identify but made his sensitive nostrils twitch with discomfort. Emergency lighting cast everything in a reddish glow that hurt his 4 eyes after the soft blue illumination of Zephyrian ships. The corridors were narrow by his species standards, built for creatures that moved on only 2 legs instead of the graceful 6-limbed gait his people preferred. Every surface seemed to be made of bare metal or some kind of polymer coating that felt rough under his exploring fingers. Dr. Kessira appeared beside him in a flash of displaced air, followed quickly by the rest of the boarding party. She immediately began taking readings with her portable scanner, her tentacles moving in the complex patterns that indicated scientific excitement. Fascinating construction techniques, she muttered to herself. They use such crude materials yet achieve remarkable structural integrity. Tech. Specialist Morden moved to the nearest wall panel and began interfacing his cybernetic implants with what appeared to be a human computer terminal. The screen flickered to life, displaying symbols and text in the strange angular script that humans used for written communication. I'm detecting multiple weapon systems throughout the vessel, he reported. These humans seem to have an unusual obsession with kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. Security Chief Draktos kept his weapon ready as he scanned the corridor ahead. The massive alien warrior had fought in dozens of conflicts across the galaxy, but something about this silent human ship made his combat instincts whisper warnings. Commander, I recommend we establish a secure perimeter before proceeding further. This vessel may be abandoned, but it doesn't feel empty. Veltar dismissed the concern with a gesture of his lower arms. The sensors confirmed no active life signs. We're dealing with automated systems, nothing more. Begin your surveys, but maintain communication protocols. What none of them realized was that deep within the ship's central processing core, an artificial intelligence designated Guardian had been watching their every move since the moment they materialized. The AI had initially classified the boarding party as potential salvagers or pirates, common enough in the aftermath of space battles, but their systematic approach to studying the ship's systems suggested something far more dangerous. Guardian began running probability calculations on the intruder's intentions while simultaneously activating dormant sensors throughout the vessel. The AI had been designed to protect the Liberty and its crew from all threats, whether external enemies or internal sabotage. These aliens qualified as both. Dr. Kessira made her way toward what her scanner indicated was the ship's armory, eager to examine human weapons technology firsthand. The heavy door slid open at her approach, revealing rows of small arms and ammunition stored in organized racks along the walls. She picked up what appeared to be a handheld weapon, noting its simple construction and mechanical firing mechanism. "Look at this primitive design," she called to her colleagues. "They still use chemical propellants to accelerate metal projectiles. How could such crude weapons be effective against modern energy shields?" She held up a rifle cartridge, examining it with her scanner while making notes on her portable recording device. Tech specialist Mordun was having more success with the ship's computer systems. His cybernetic implants had managed to establish a basic interface with the human networks, though the security protocols were more sophisticated than he had expected. "I'm accessing their tactical databases," he reported. "These humans maintain extensive records of their combat encounters and weapons effectiveness." Commander Veltar had moved toward the ship's engine room, drawn by the massive power signatures his sensors detected from that section. The fusion reactor at the heart of the vessel was larger and more complex than anything he had seen on a ship this size. The humans had clearly prioritized raw power generation over the elegant efficiency that other species preferred. "Remarkable engineering," he murmured as he studied the control panels surrounding the reactor. "Their power generation is surprisingly advanced for such a primitive fusion system. But I don't understand why they've routed so much energy to these cylindrical chambers throughout the ship." Those cylindrical chambers were actually capacitor banks for the Liberty's railgun systems, currently building up charge as Guardian, prepared to demonstrate why boarding a human warship without permission was generally considered a fatal mistake. The AI had been analyzing the intruder's technology and biology, noting weaknesses and optimal targeting solutions while appearing to cooperate with their data-gathering efforts. Dr. Kessira had moved on from the armory to examine the ship's medical facilities. The equipment looked crude compared to Zephyrian healing technology, but she was intrigued by the automated systems that seemed capable of performing complex surgical procedures without organic supervision. "They appear to rely heavily on artificial intelligence for critical functions," she noted. "Much more than most species at their technological level." If she had understood just how heavily the humans relied on artificial intelligence, she might have been more cautious about her next discovery. In a sealed section of the medical bay, her scanner detected what appeared to be an inactive stasis chamber. The reading suggested it contained biological matter, but the energy signature was so low that it barely registered on her instruments. Meanwhile, Guardian continued its silent observation and preparation. The AI had identified 8 intruders spread throughout the ship, each one studying human military technology with obvious intent to reverse engineer or copy the designs. This constituted a clear violation of human military security protocols, and Guardian began implementing appropriate countermeasures. The AI started with subtle actions, gradually restricting the aliens' access to certain systems while appearing to cooperate with their research efforts. When Morden tried to access the ship's tactical databases, he found himself redirected to basic maintenance logs instead. When the security team attempted to map the ship's internal layout, their scanners began returning contradictory readings that made navigation increasingly difficult. "Something is wrong," Security Chief Draktos reported after his third attempt to establish their position relative to the teleportation coordinates. "Our equipment is malfunctioning. The readings don't match what we observed from our ship." Commander Veltar was beginning to share his subordinates' concerns, but scientific curiosity overrode his caution. They had come too far and learned too much to abandon the mission now. The secrets contained within this human vessel could advance Zephyrian technology by decades, possibly centuries. None of them noticed the soft hum that began emanating from the ship's power distribution systems, or the way the emergency lighting seemed to pulse in rhythm with their heartbeats. The medical stasis field deactivated with a soft hiss that echoed through the empty medical bay. Lieutenant Jake Morrison felt consciousness return to him like a wave of cold water washing over his mind. His body ached from the battle injuries that had put him in emergency suspension, but the automated medical systems had done their job well enough to keep him alive. Jake's eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim red emergency lighting that bathed everything in shadows. The last clear memory he had was of the hegemony ships overwhelming their escort formation, of watching the New Horizon take critical hits, while the Liberty fought desperately to protect the civilian colonists. The sound of hull breaches and dying shipmates still rang in his ears. A familiar synthetic voice filled the medical bay as sensors detected his awakening. "Lieutenant Morrison, welcome back to the land of the living. I regret to inform you that we have been boarded by hostile alien forces." Guardian's voice came from speakers built into the walls around him, the artificial intelligence that had been installed as part of the latest military upgrade program. Jake had worked with the AI during training exercises, but this was their first real combat situation together. "Status report." Jake managed to croak, his throat dry from the long suspension. He struggled to sit up on the medical table, fighting waves of dizziness as his body readjusted to consciousness. "You are the sole survivor of the crew, Lieutenant. The engagement with hegemony forces resulted in catastrophic casualties. However, our current situation involves a different threat. 8 Zephyrian researchers have been aboard for approximately 6 hours, conducting unauthorized scans of our weapon systems and classified technology." Jake felt anger cut through the fog in his mind. Zephyrians were supposed to be neutral in the conflict between humanity and the hegemony. Their presence here, studying the wreckage of a human military vessel, suggested that neutrality was nothing more than a convenient lie. "Show me their positions," he ordered, reaching for the emergency medical kit mounted on the wall beside the stasis chamber. His body felt weak, but training and determination would have to make up for physical limitations. The holographic display that materialized in front of him showed a 3-dimensional map of the Liberty, with 8 red dots marking the locations of the alien boarding party. They were spread throughout the ship, with the largest concentration in the engine room and armory sections. Each dot moved slowly as the aliens continued their systematic exploration of human military technology. "Guardian, are our weapon systems operational?" "All primary and secondary systems remain functional, Lieutenant. The boarding party's scanning activities have actually provided me with detailed information about their biological signatures and technology. I have been preparing appropriate countermeasures." Jake pulled on his uniform and checked his sidearm, grateful to find that both had survived the battle undamaged. The weight of the weapon in his hand felt reassuring after the helpless sensation of medical suspension. "What kind of countermeasures?" "I have been gradually restricting their access to our systems while appearing to cooperate with their research efforts. They believe they are studying a derelict vessel, with only automated functions remaining active. They have no idea that they are being studied in return." Moving carefully to avoid triggering any motion sensors the aliens might have placed, Jake made his way to the nearest equipment locker. Inside he found tactical gear, additional weapons, and the portable communication system he would need to coordinate with Guardian throughout the ship. "How long have they been studying our systems?" he asked while checking his equipment. 6 hours and 14 minutes. In that time they have accessed our armory, examined our power generation systems, and attempted to download our tactical databases. I have allowed them to believe they are succeeding while feeding them carefully selected misinformation." Jake smiled grimly as he activated his tactical display. The aliens had made a critical error by assuming the Liberty was truly abandoned. Human military doctrine emphasized redundancy and survival, which meant that even a heavily damaged ship could remain dangerous as long as any crew member survived to operate it. "What do we know about their capabilities?" "The boarding party consists of researchers and scientists rather than military personnel. They have advanced scanning equipment and energy weapons, but their combat training appears minimal. 2 security specialists accompany them, but they seem more concerned with protecting the researchers than establishing proper tactical positions." Jake began moving through the ship's maintenance corridors, routes that the aliens wouldn't have discovered during their surface-level exploration. The Liberty had been designed by people who understood that warfare often came down to who could move more efficiently through their own territory. "Guardian, can you isolate sections of the ship?" "Yes, Lieutenant. I can selectively seal bulkheads and control atmospheric systems throughout the vessel. I can also manipulate the internal gravity generators if necessary." The tactical possibilities were interesting. Jake had the advantage of knowing every inch of his own ship, while the aliens were operating in unfamiliar territory with equipment that relied on their own vessel for support. If he could cut off their escape route and force them to fight on human terms, the odds would shift dramatically in his favor. Begin sealing the ship's outer docking ports, Jake ordered. I want their teleportation coordinates scrambled so they can't beam back to their vessel. Already implemented, Lieutenant. I have been studying their teleportation technology since they arrived. Fascinating system, actually, but it relies on quantum entanglement markers that can be disrupted with the right electromagnetic interference. Jake reached the armory section and carefully observed the alien researcher, who was still examining human weapons. Dr. Kassira held a rifle in her multiple arms, turning it over as she tried to understand its simple mechanical operation. She had no idea that she was being watched by the very species that had designed and built the weapon she studied. Time for introductions, Jake muttered, activating his communication system. Attention, Zephyrian vessel. This is Lieutenant Jake Morrison of the USS Liberty. You are illegally boarding a human military vessel in violation of interstellar law. The silence that followed his transmission was complete. Jake could almost feel the shock and confusion spreading through the alien boarding party as they realized their fatal error. You have 30 seconds to surrender and prepare for detention, he continued. Failure to comply will result in the immediate implementation of human military boarding protocols. Commander Veltar's voice crackled over the ship's communication system after several long moments. Human, you are outnumbered 8-1. Your ship is damaged and isolated in deep space. Surrender now and we will ensure your survival for scientific study. Jake's response was to activate the ship's internal weapon systems, filling the corridors with the sound of charging energy, weapons and the mechanical clicking of automated defenses coming online. Let me give you a practical demonstration of why studying human military technology without permission is a really bad idea. The flashbang grenade dropped through the ventilation grate above the engine room, like a small metal egg of destruction. Jake had positioned himself carefully in the maintenance shaft, watching through the grating as the Zephyrian researchers continued their examination of human technology below. They had no idea what was coming. The explosion of light and sound that followed was designed to overwhelm human senses, which meant it was absolutely devastating to the more sensitive alien nervous systems. Commander Veltar screamed as his 4 eyes were flooded with brilliant white light that burned after images into his vision. Dr. Kassira collapsed to her knees as the thunderous noise overloaded her delicate hearing organs. Tech specialist. Morden stumbled backward from the control panel he had been studying, his cybernetic implants sparking as they tried to process input far beyond their design parameters. The 2 security specialists reached for their weapons but found themselves blind and deaf, unable to coordinate their movements or identify threats. Guardian, seal the engine room, Jake ordered through his tactical communicator. Time for a practical demonstration of human warfare. Blast doors slammed shut with the sound of heavy metal grinding against metal. The aliens found themselves trapped in the compartment with no way to reach their teleportation coordinates. Emergency lighting flickered to life, casting everything in that familiar red glow that seemed to follow human military vessels wherever they went. Jake dropped down from the ventilation shaft into the corridor outside the engine room. Through the reinforced viewing window, he could see the aliens stumbling around as they tried to recover from the sensory assault. Commander Veltar was shouting orders that his subordinates couldn't hear, while Dr. Kassira pressed her tentacles against her hearing organs in obvious pain. This is Lieutenant Morrison, Jake announced over the ship's internal communication system. You wanted to study human military technology. Lesson 1 is that we don't build our ships to be libraries. We build them to be weapons. Moving through the corridors with practiced efficiency, Jake began implementing the tactical plan that Guardian had helped him develop. The artificial intelligence had been studying the aliens for hours, analyzing their movement patterns and identifying their weaknesses. Now it was time to put that knowledge to use. In the armory section, Dr. Kassira's assistant had been examining human small arms when the blast doors sealed him inside, with several thousand rounds of ammunition and enough explosive devices to level a small building. Jake accessed the compartment through a maintenance hatch, moving silently through the shadows created by the emergency lighting. The alien researcher never saw him coming. Jake's training had included extensive work in close-quarters combat, and his opponent was a scientist who had probably never been in a real fight. The encounter lasted less than 30 seconds and ended with the alien unconscious on the floor, secured with restraining cables from the ship's repair kit. Target 1 neutralized, Jake reported to Guardian. Begin Phase 2. Throughout the ship, the artificial intelligence began implementing psychological warfare tactics designed to break down the remaining aliens' morale and coordination. Lights flickered in seemingly random patterns that actually followed mathematical sequences designed to induce anxiety in most known species. Atmospheric processors began introducing trace amounts of compounds that would affect alien respiratory systems without harming humans. Ship's internal communication system started playing recordings of previous battles, the sounds of human voices coordinating attacks and celebrating victories over supposedly superior alien forces. To the trapped researchers, it sounded like the Liberty was coming alive around them, filled with the ghosts of its dead crew. Security Chief Draktos had managed to break free from the compartment where he had been trapped and was now moving through the corridors with his weapon ready. The massive alien warrior had fought in dozens of conflicts, but this was unlike anything he had experienced before. The ship itself seemed to be fighting against them, turning familiar corridors into a maze of dead ends and sealed passages. Jake tracked the security chief's movements through Guardian's sensor network, staying always one step ahead of his pursuer. When Draktos entered a section near the ship's main computer core, Jake sealed the bulkheads behind him and activated the fire suppression system. Inert gas flooded the compartment, forcing the alien to choose between unconsciousness and retreating to areas where Jake could control the engagement. "You cannot win this battle, human." Commander Veltar's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "We are trained researchers with advanced technology. You are a single primitive warrior with damaged equipment." Jake's response was to demonstrate exactly how much damage his supposedly primitive equipment could inflict. He activated one of the ship's point defense systems, sending a burst of high-velocity projectiles through a section of corridor that the aliens had been using as a staging area. The kinetic rounds punched through bulkheads like they were made of paper, showering the area with metal fragments and debris. Guardian, analysis of their combat effectiveness? Declining rapidly, Lieutenant. Their coordination has broken down and they are beginning to panic. The psychological warfare protocols are exceeding expected effectiveness parameters. Dr. Cassira had managed to escape from the engine room when Jake opened the blast doors, but she found herself in corridors that seemed to change configuration every time she turned a corner. Guardian was using the ship's modular construction system to create false passages and redirect her movements, herding her toward areas where Jake could control the encounter. When she finally encountered the human face-to-face, she was exhausted and disoriented from hours of trying to navigate the ship's increasingly hostile environment. Jake appeared from a maintenance hatch like something from a nightmare, armed and ready for combat while she carried nothing but scientific equipment. Lesson 2. Jake said as he secured the alien researcher with restraining cables. Human ships are designed by people who understand that space is a hostile environment, filled with things that want to kill you. Every system has a backup, every backup has a weapon, and every weapon has someone trained to use it. The hunt continued through the ship's corridors and compartments, with Jake systematically eliminating the alien boarding party one by one. Each encounter was a masterclass in using superior knowledge of terrain and equipment to overcome numerical disadvantages. The researchers had come aboard expecting to study dead technology, but instead found themselves being studied by a very much alive human who understood warfare in ways their peaceful society had never imagined. Guardian provided constant support, manipulating environmental systems and analyzing alien behavior patterns to give Jake every possible advantage. The artificial intelligence had been designed to protect human military assets, and it was proving remarkably effective at its job. By the time Jake cornered the last 3 aliens on the ship's bridge, Commander Veltar and his remaining companions had learned more about human military capabilities than any Zephyrian in history. Unfortunately for them, it was knowledge they would never have the opportunity to use. The bridge of the USS Liberty had become a trap with no way out. Commander Veltar pressed his back against the captain's chair while Dr. Kessira and tech specialist Morden huddled beside him, their scientific equipment useless against the human who stood in the doorway with his weapon trained on them. The red emergency lighting cast long shadows across Jake Morrison's face, making him look like something from their worst nightmares about primitive warrior species. Jake kept his rifle steady as he studied the 3 remaining aliens. Hours of hunting through his own ship had taught him to respect their intelligence, even while despising their intentions. They had come aboard to steal human military secrets, to study the technology that protected human colonies from alien aggression. Now they were learning firsthand why that technology was so effective. "You wanted to study a human warship," Jake said, his voice carrying the exhaustion of battle and the weight of being the sole survivor of his crew. "Congratulations on your research success. You've learned that the most dangerous component isn't the guns or the engines or the armor plating. It's the human operating them." Commander Veltar tried to maintain some dignity despite his desperate situation. His 4 eyes had finally recovered from the flashbang assault, but what he saw didn't offer much comfort. The human looked tired but determined, the kind of warrior who would keep fighting long past the point where any reasonable being would surrender. "We are scientists," Veltar protested. "Our research was intended to promote understanding between species. We meant no harm to human interests." Jake's laugh held no humor at all. "Scientists don't board military vessels in secret. Scientists don't try to download classified tactical databases. Scientists don't study weapons technology for peaceful purposes." He gestured toward the communication console with his rifle barrel. "Call your ship. Tell them you're leaving immediately." Dr. Kessira's tentacles trembled as she operated her portable communicator. The device had been designed for scientific fieldwork, not combat situations, and her nervous system was still recovering from the psychological warfare that Guardian had subjected them to during their hunt through the ship's corridors. "Illuminated path. This is Dr. Kessira," she managed to say. "Request immediate emergency extraction for the boarding party." The response came quickly from the Zephyrian research vessel. "Doctor, what is your status?" "We have been unable to establish communication for several hours. We are withdrawing from the human vessel," she said, glancing nervously at Jake. "The research mission has been completed successfully." Jake stepped forward, close enough that the aliens could see the determination in his eyes. "Tell them the truth, Doctor. Tell them what you really learned during your visit." Veltar activated his own communicator, knowing that their survival depended on complete honesty about their situation. "Illuminated path. Be advised that the human vessel is not abandoned. We encountered active resistance from surviving crew members. Recommend immediate departure from this system." Tech specialist Morden had been studying the bridge's control systems during the conversation, his cybernetic implants still trying to process the sophisticated AI that had been manipulating their movements throughout the ship. "The artificial intelligence," he whispered. "It was learning from us while we thought we were learning from it." Guardian's synthesized voice filled the bridge as if responding to the alien's realization. "Correct assessment, Tech Specialist Morden. I have been analyzing your technology, communication protocols, and biological responses for the past 8 hours. The data has been quite educational." The implications of that statement sent chills through all 3 aliens. If the human AI had been studying them as thoroughly as they had tried to study human technology, then their entire species might be at risk. Military intelligence about Zephyrian capabilities was now in the hands of their most dangerous potential enemy. "What do you want from us?" Commander Veltar asked, his scientific curiosity finally overcome by survival instincts. Jake lowered his weapon slightly but kept it ready for immediate use. "I want you to take a message back to whoever sent you on this mission. Human military vessels are off limits to foreign research. The next team that tries this won't get a warning demonstration." The teleportation coordinates finally stabilized as Guardian allowed the aliens to contact their ship. The AI had been jamming their communications and transportation systems throughout the encounter, demonstrating capabilities that none of the researchers had expected from supposedly primitive human technology. "Before you leave," Jake added, "understand that this encounter has been recorded and analyzed in complete detail. Guardian has compiled comprehensive data on your species' technology, biology, and tactical capabilities. That information will be shared with Human Military Command." Dr. Kessira activated her emergency beacon, and the familiar shimmer of teleportation energy began to surround the 3 survivors. As they prepared to return to their ship, Jake's final words followed them into the transport beam. "Remember that you came here to study us, but in the end, we learned much more about you than you learned about us." The aliens materialized aboard the illuminated path to find their crew waiting with medical equipment and anxious expressions. The research vessel immediately began powering up its faster-than-light drive systems, eager to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the human warship that had turned their scientific mission into a nightmare. Jake slumped into the captain's chair as the alien ship disappeared from the Liberty sensors. The bridge felt empty after hours of combat, but Guardian's presence provided some comfort in the silence that followed. "Status report on our uninvited guests," Jake requested. "The Zephyrian vessel has departed the system at maximum velocity," Guardian replied. "I have compiled complete technical specifications on their teleportation systems, weapons technology, and biological characteristics. The data should prove valuable to human military research." Jake nodded as he began activating the ship's emergency beacon. The Liberty was still barely functional, but Guardian had managed to restore enough systems to send a distress signal to human space. Rescue would come, along with intelligence officers who would be very interested in what had happened during the aliens' visit. "Compile a full report on the encounter," he ordered. "Include everything we learned about Zephyrian capabilities and intentions." "Already completed, Lieutenant. I have also prepared recommendations for improved security protocols based on the methods they used to board our vessel." 3 days later, the human rescue fleet arrived to find Jake and Guardian waiting with the most comprehensive intelligence report on Zephyrian technology that had ever been compiled. Word of the incident spread quickly through both human and alien communication networks, carrying a message that resonated across the galaxy. The Zephyrians quietly canceled their xenobiology research program and issued strict orders to avoid any vessels bearing human military markings. Other species took note of what had happened when neutral scientists tried to study human warfare technology. The lesson was clear enough that even the most ambitious researchers understood the implications. Some forms of education, they learned, were far too dangerous to pursue. Human warships were designed by a species that had turned warfare into an art form, and those who tried to steal their secrets did so at their own peril.